Good afternoon. Good evening, whichever you prefer. It's great to be here. And I want to thank you all for joining us today for an event and talk about the effects of climate change. And get a sense of what Peace Corps and some Peace Corps volunteers who you'll actually meet later are doing about it. My name is Stacy Rhodes. I'm the Chief of Staff at Peace Corps. And we have a very special guest here tonight with us, who I'll introduce in just a minute. We also have one of our wonderful staff people here, David Woods from OPATS, our environmental specialist. Before I ask our guest Jeff to come up on stage, though, I would like to thank a couple of people and then speak briefly about the importance of the topic. First, I want to thank Connor Sanchez, my colleague, the Special Assistant to Director, who's been instrumental in setting up this event, working with both OPATS and the recruiting office. I'd like to thank all the folks who are staffing here tonight from our Mid-Atlantic recruiting office for supporting this event. I'd like to thank David for his participation in this and to all the work that's being OPAT staff who are doing work in environment. And shout out to someone who's not here, Kirk Longstein, Captain Kirk, captain of our green team, who's been instrumental in moving us forward as an agency with respect to environmental concerns. Climate change represents certainly one of the greatest challenges of our time, and one thing is certain: we really have no time to lose in addressing it. Just last month, Secretary of State John Kerry spoke to an audience in Jakarta, Indonesia, about the urgency of addressing climate change, and he said this. He said, "The fact is that climate change, if left unchecked, will wipe out many more communities from the face of the earth. That is unacceptable under any circumstances, but it's even more unacceptable because we know what we can do and what we need to do in order to deal with this challenge." Secretary Kerry is absolutely right about this. Science does tell us that extreme events are now more frequent and more severe than ever. The rising seas threaten coastlines around the globe, and the dry regions are at much higher risk of destructive wildfires. These kinds of changes will greatly affect both health and agriculture in communities in every corner of the planet. We simply have to take action to prepare for the consequences of such changes. It turns out, of course, that many of the populations around the world that face the biggest risks of these changes reside in countries where Peace Corps sends its volunteers. So tonight we're going to learn a lot about what's being done by at least some of these volunteers to increase rural access to energy and to mitigate the effects of climate changes, and to support the use of renewable energy and energy-efficient technologies in developing countries. So to spark our discussion tonight, we're very honored to have with us the director of a widely acclaimed documentary feature film called Chasing Ice, Mr. Jeff Orlowski. Jeff, just stand up for a second and then let me to keep introducing you a little longer, then you can come. In 2007, Jeff got his first taste of the Atlantic when, as a Stanford student, he seized the opportunity to work as a videographer with National Geographic photographer James Baylog on the initial expedition of the Extreme Ice Survey, EIS. That winter, the EIS team scouted and filmed glaciers that now appear in the documentary film feature, Chasing Ice. Jeff is a native of New York and has been filming the EIS project all around the world. He just noted he's really on the road most of the time. He works in some of the most extreme conditions imaginable on locations in Iceland, Greenland, Bolivia, where I served as a Peace Corps volunteer, the Alps, Alaska, and Glacier National Park in Montana. Jeff's previous work has taken him to the Tour de France, for a behind-the-scenes documentary, and he has photographed and filmed a number of famous people, including Robin Williams, Jane Goodall, and Nelson Mandela. In 2009, Jeff founded Exposure, a film production company dedicated to socially relevant filmmaking with an eye towards important issues important to humanity. Jeff's clients have included General Motors, Apple, the Jane Goodall Institute, Stanford University, and the Race Across America. So, joining us today from Boulder, Colorado, please join me in welcoming Jeff Orlowski.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Thank you, Connor and David. Thank you for setting this up. Connor and I went to a camp together many, many years ago, and I was his counselor, and I'll save some of those stories for later. Just to kind of get a sense of the room, how many people here are interested, prospective Peace Corps volunteers? A bunch of hands, cool. And then I guess we have a bunch of staff here as well. Great, cool. So how many people have already, so has most of the staff served as Peace Corps volunteers? Who has been a volunteer already? Awesome, very cool. So as Stacey said, my name is Jeff Orlowski, and I directed this film, Chasing Ice, which when we first started working on this project, there was no plan to make a movie, in fact. And it started off from a volunteering perspective. It actually started off because I just wanted to work with this guy, James. And I met this photographer, and I think if this clicker works. So I met this photographer, James, through a mutual friend, and all I wanted to do was work with him. And he was a National Geographic photographer, and he was telling me stories of scuba diving and traveling to these coral reefs and exploring that. And then he was photographing on volcanoes, active live volcanoes in Hawaii, and documenting that. And I thought it was the coolest job that anybody could possibly ever have. And when I was in college, I really wanted to work with him. And that was, for me, that was really where everything got started. That was the hook for me. Because here was an opportunity to meet this guy, and he had a great team already. He had a guy on the team who had summited Everest 5 times. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get my foot in the door? How do I get to work with him? And it was really through making that offer by volunteering that I was able to get involved with him. I actually was considering and wanting very much to be a Peace Corps volunteer. And my senior year in college, I was trying to figure out what was going on. And I met James, and my spring break from college, I went with James to Iceland, which is not your typical spring break, I would say. And then right before graduating, I went with him to Greenland. So another cold, cold place for an atypical college experience. We had some very, very cold weather out there, but I do think today in DC was a little bit chillier. It was by far more frigid. So I got to meet James and got to go out to these beautiful, beautiful places. And if this works, I'm going to show just the trailer of Chasing Ice, just so you can kind of get a sense of what we did, in case you haven't seen the film.
Jim, on one of our regular check-ins, Jim, nothing's happening.
It's starting out of, I think, kind of starting here.
Look at that. Look at the whole thing.
It all started in Iceland.
I think I'm so certain to get wet, I'll take my boots off.
I never imagined that you could see glaciers this big disappearing in such a short time. There's a powerful piece of history that's unfolding in these pictures, and I have to go back. The initial goal was to put out 25 cameras for 3 years, shoot every hour as long as it was daylight, that would show you how the landscape was changing.
Oh, this is the way to travel, my friend.
Putting really delicate electronics in the harshest conditions on the planet.
It's not the nicest environment for technology.
I do not want to go any lower than this. It's just bottomless. I'm going out here on this broken fin, and I assume it won't collapse. Every once in a while, you get to say, what were you thinking? Maybe that office job wasn't so bad.
This thing is loose.
Rock?
It's not working. God, all of that obsession means nothing if it doesn't work.
Just be careful. Don't get too close to the edge, all right?
It's terrifying.
This knee has had 2 surgeries and it really could use a 3rd.
He goes to that point where he can't anymore, and sometimes he's going further.
We have low on resonating number 2.
This is big stuff happening right now.
Okay, onward.
This is the memory of the landscape. That landscape is gone. It may never be seen again in the history of civilization, and it's stored right here.
So I just wanted to have this experience with a photographer, learn the trade from him, learn how to take good pictures, how to work with National Geographic and things like that. And I got a completely unexpected adventure of a lifetime. And I went to places that I never in a million years would I ever have thought I would go to. So the idea that James had was to do time lapses of glaciers. He got a bunch of equipment. You can see all this equipment kind of lined up. And he got everything, he collected it all, and then the task was to go out and install it out in the field. And I'm just gonna, okay, great. This is a little meta for you. This is a time lapse of the time lapse system being built. But it just kind of gives you a sense of all the parts and widgets and pieces that it took to actually put the system together so that we could take this and install it out in these very, very remote locations. The cameras, they needed to withstand negative 40-degree temperatures and 200-mile-an-hour winds and winters with no sunlight. So just from a technical perspective, that was a huge engineering challenge to be able to go out and build these systems. So I've got a bunch of images that I just want to show you, just like a brief little slideshow. But this was the very first installation that we did out in the field. This glacier is the Solheim Glacier, and this was spring break. And then this shot here, this is going to Greenland later that summer for the very first time, flying in helicopters for the first time, and really just getting to see these beautiful, beautiful landscapes. This is going ice climbing in Iceland. And once again, like, I never, ever would have imagined doing any of these things growing up. This is the very first time I went ice climbing in Alaska, and that's just like the stupid smile on my face. That was really the essence and the spirit of what that was like. Has anybody here ever gone ice climbing? 3 hands, 4 hands. For me, the first time was so spectacular. You've got these metal spikes sticking out of your boots, and you've got these 2 axes in your hand, and you can walk up a vertical sheet of ice with just those simple tools. So that was the first time, and it was a load of fun. And this is James climbing at the same spot. Now, just one interesting story about this photograph. You can kind of see this area of black, dark ice, and then in the background it's a bit whiter, it's a bit cleaner. And the black ice is called dead ice. It's on the side of a glacier, and you'll see in some of the time lapses I'll show you later, the glacier flows just like a river does. But next to the mountain and next to the edges, there are sometimes patches of ice that get stuck, kind of wedged across on the side. And they call it dead ice because it's not flowing with the regular glacier. So this whole week, we were out there camping by the site, photographing, going back in and out of this location just to see what the ice was looking like. And we went back to the same spot a couple months later, and everything here in this foreground shot, all of that dead ice had disappeared. It had fallen into the ocean. That's in Alaska. This is the Columbia Glacier in Alaska. So that ice that we had spent days on absolutely just vanished. And I was trying to come up with a good analogy. How do you think about that? It's like if you're at your house and you're living in your home and you go on a vacation, you go on a trip, and you come back a couple weeks later or a month later, and every single home on your block has disappeared. And every single one of those buildings has just vanished. That's giving you the slightest hint of scale that we're talking about here. And that's one of the biggest issues about climate change, I think, is the difficulty of communicating the scale of how big this issue is. So I have more images that I'll come to later about that. This is at the Svinesfellsjökull in Iceland. It's taken me 3 years to get the pronunciation of that, and it's probably still wrong. But this here is one of the most beautiful places that we got to go to. And like I was saying before, it was just an amazing experience to be able to go visit these glaciers and visit these landscapes. And you'll notice there's a person in the photograph. That's me standing in the photo. I was wearing I don't typically tell this story. I was wearing a black jacket that day, or it was like a dark green jacket. And James was taking some photos, and he was really upset that I was wearing this dark jacket because it's hard to see people in the photograph sometime when it's just a black shape as opposed to a clear human body. So I reversed the jacket. The inside happened to be orange. I reversed the jacket on the spot. He took some more pictures. And this image is on display at the Denver airport, at the Chicago airport. This image has been seen a lot. And it's because of that person, that scale reference, that you can start to get a sense of how big this place is. And a lot of the photographs that we took always had to have people in it. This is one of the camera installations that James did. This is giving you a sense of that scale with one of the camera systems that we installed. And I think, I don't have the order in front of me, but I think this next shot, yes. This is, we photoshopped this. So this is not the original photograph, just because I want you to see this piece of ice for a second and think about how big or small that chunk of ice might be. You know, is that the size of a car? Is that a bus? Is that a house? And when you see on the top of the iceberg, when you see Adam standing there and you see the human scale, that's when you start to realize how big this place is. And this photograph, it actually goes back a couple of, probably 3/4 of a mile to a mile from where that iceberg is to where the calving face of the glacier is in the background, that kind of wall of ice in the background. So this is a location where icebergs are just churning out and being spit into the ocean, and they just go straight out to the sea. Adam was unfortunately one of the guinea pigs that was always in this position. James was taking photographs. I was shooting video of James taking photographs, and so that left Adam, who had to be the model, to stand in the most dangerous place. I always pictured in this spot, the icebergs roll and move all the time. And I always picture what would happen if this iceberg started to roll over when Adam was standing on it. It would have been really, really bad. I just picture this massively impressive log roll of him just running to stay on top. But we did have walkie-talkies, we had communication with him, and he seemed okay. That is also Adam in this photograph, standing on the curve of this landscape. But this is a location that's called Birthday Canyon. And it's called Birthday Canyon because we named it that. We discovered this place on James's birthday. And it was July, it was summertime, and because we were the first people to ever find the spot, we kind of got to name it. And this is in Greenland. This is on the Greenland ice sheet, west coast of Greenland, just north of Ilulissat. And this is a place where there aren't many places on the planet that are still unnamed. You know, there's some trenches and some mountaintops here and there, but this is a place that we got to go to, and we spent a couple weeks camped out at the spot, exploring this landscape and documenting it. And I'll just spend a brief minute talking about some of this dark black stuff that you see at the bottom of the photograph, because it's a substance called cryogonite, and it's something that we really spent a lot of time documenting, because it comes from a couple different places. It comes from dust from Southeast Asia, that's from the Taklamakan Desert that lands on the Greenland ice sheet. But it also comes a lot from industrial emissions and from black carbon that we as human beings are burning and emitting, and it lands on the surface of the Greenland ice sheet. And it lands there and it collects, and then it kind of forms river channels and stream beds, and it collects into these larger areas. And all over the surface of the Greenland ice sheet, there are billions of holes, of cryogonite holes, where this black dark stuff is collecting, and it's causing the ice sheet to melt faster. It's one of those positive feedback cycles that as you add more and more to the system, it's making the consequences of the system work faster. So that's something that we're seeing all across the Greenland ice sheet, and that's one of the biggest question marks with climate change. Just how bad will those positive feedback cycles be? So we spent a lot of time filming from helicopters. In this particular case, the window, we removed the window so that we're not taking pictures through the plexiglass. You know, when you take a photograph out of the airplane window, sometimes you get all those scratches and water droplets. So to get the best images that can be published in National Geographic or go into the film, we would remove the window. In some cases, we would remove the door entirely. So you're sitting there, and here's the edge of the helicopter, and it's flying around, and you're right there by the edge. And see, it's a little nerve-wracking at times, to say the least. But we would always, you can see James has a strap on his chest, and the cameras are attached just in case anything went wrong. You would then just be hanging from the helicopter. But we were always taking safety very, very carefully. James has lost, I think, upwards of 14 friends out in the field. And that's due to light aircraft accidents and climbing accidents. Those metal spikes that you wear on your boots, they're called crampons, and one of the most common accidents is when people are hiking, their crampon catches their other pant leg, and they trip and they fall off of a cliff. It's one of the simplest, smallest little things that could have catastrophic consequences. So you learn to walk very differently. You walk duck-legged when you have those crampons on. We had, as you saw, a brief little clip in the trailer, we had one emergency helicopter landing where we were flying. James was sitting next to me, one of the scientists from Ohio State University was sitting up front, and they were talking to the pilot on a headset, and I didn't have communication with the pilot. And we're about halfway through this 45-minute flight. And we're going, and out of nowhere, the helicopter just does a 180 and turns around. And I have no idea what was going on, and James just tells me, oh, just film. just film what's going on. And so, having no real sense of what was happening, I was starting to document it and was able to capture some of the audio with the camera, and later learned that one of the engines was low on oil pressure, and that the pilot had put it into idle, but that didn't really do enough, and so we had to shut that engine off. And now, with all of our gear and all of that additional weight on the helicopter, we were going back with just one engine. And in Greenland, every single helicopter out there, because it is so remote, every helicopter has 2 engines. And this was one of the first times that James, who has done hundreds of photo shoots, I don't know how many times he's been in helicopters, this was one of the first times that he actually had a helicopter with 2 engines on it. So we're coming back into the airport, and now we've got low oil pressure in the second engine because it's working much harder than it typically would. And because it didn't have the strength in one engine to lower us down like a helicopter, we had to come in and do a landing like a plane would. So here we are with this massively overweighted helicopter with one engine coming down on the runway, bouncing and skidding down the runway until we came to a stop. And then the pilot, we get out and everybody's like just relieved, and the pilot's like, oh yeah, that was unfortunate. Just like, it's a non-event for the pilot. It was just like, it's no big deal. Like, we've trained for this. But it really gives you a sense of how remote some of these landscapes are. And you're out there, and when you go to the Greenland ice sheet and you land on the ice sheet, you have your pilot gear, you empty everything out, and the pilot takes off and flies away. And when those helicopter rotors are disappearing, the sound is disappearing in the distance, you realize how alone you are. And that it's you and your 3 other teammates, and you've got this pile of provisions, and hopefully nothing happens. Hopefully no medical emergencies happen. Hopefully you don't run out of supplies, because you are very, very alone. And you're in a landscape that is just ice in all directions. There are no animals. There are no bugs. Absolutely no wildlife, no birds that go to these areas. This is a part of the Greenland ice sheet that's so remote. The only sounds are of wind and of water, and the sound of melting water that are going down on these streams. And it is one of the most desolate places that I could possibly imagine. There were times when the weather where we were was totally clear, blue skies just like this photograph, but at the airport where they're releasing the helicopters, they had clouds and terrible visibility. And the way these helicopter companies work, they mandate a certain amount of visibility for the choppers to fly because of how dangerous it is. So there were days like this where everything is great, but the pilots are like, sorry, we're calling them on the satellite phone, they're saying, sorry, we can't come pick you up. It's just the weather's too bad to come pick you up. So you're like, okay, then we'll try and see when the next window works out, and they call you later in the day, and sorry, there's no good chance for us to come right now. And the way it works with some of these companies, there's only one company, Air Greenland, that has a complete monopoly over any sort of travel like this in Greenland. They work based on a calendar, and if any booking is on the calendar, that's the top priority, and you get the next available window after that. So there were some days where we couldn't get picked up and they were doing other flights and we were there. I was stuck out there for an entire day where they didn't come and pick us up. James was stuck one time for over 4 days, I think it was about 5 days, where they kept going on the normal schedule before they could pick James up. Fortunately, he had all the food and fuel and provisions that he needed. And the sad irony is that who's booking all of these flights? It's fossil fuel companies who are doing exploration, that have summer contracts, that are booking up the entire contract for the entire summer to explore and see where they can now start digging because all of this ice is disappearing. And it's opened up more and more land for them to exploit. So there's an interesting and sad irony there. But you go out to these landscapes, and like I said, you can see all the gear that we're wearing. We went through a lot of safety training and preparedness just to make sure that the entire team was equipped. You are only as strong as your weakest link. If somebody falls in a crevasse, the rest of the team needs to rescue that person and haul that person out. So you can kind of see on our belts, on our harnesses, we're wearing all of this climbing gear. So if Stacy and I are climbing and he falls into a crevasse, I now need to use the ice axe that's in my hand at all times to do a self-arrest. So we're attached on a rope, and you keep tension on that rope. This is an atypical situation where it's very safe and we knew we could stand next to each other. But when you're walking, you keep that rope pretty tight so that if somebody falls over that edge, it's immediately starting to pull me. It doesn't create a whiplash effect. and I fall, I hit the ground, I've got to put all my weight onto this one little point on that ice axe. You can see that little tip at the end of the thing that James is holding. All of your weight's got to go onto that, and I've got to somehow stop myself before I go over the edge.
Please.
And please, yes. So I've got Stacy's hanging down there, and then I have to take these anchors off of my belt, screw it into the ice, transfer the weight of the rope onto the ice, onto that anchor, rig a pulley system with a 3-point Z pulley that is now going to give me all the mechanical leverage I need to be able to, by myself, haul Stacy out of this hole. And that's something where you are pretty darn sure that you want to make sure everybody on your team knows how to do that, and that the person who's attached to the other end of your rope has those skills. And we spent some time in some very, very beautiful places. So this is another place that we got to name called Survey Canyon. And it was named, this is the first place we ever discovered that we could name, and it's named after the Extreme Ice Survey, which is the project. And it's just this beautiful meandering river, and once again you can see the people for scale reference. This is me sitting a bit too close to one of the edges. You actually learn there are many, many different kinds of ice, and you've all probably heard the phrase that a lot of local Inuits have 20 different names for different types of ice. This particular ice, because it's been exposed to sun for so long, it is very, very grippy. Your boots get some pretty good texture on it. It's very easy to have a lot of friction there. But there are some parts where that river is, if you looked at the ice underneath that river, it is as slick as glass. It is more slick than glass. It is the slipperiest ice you will ever see. And you are basically, if you don't have crampons, if you don't have those spikes on your shoes, you will just slip and fall everywhere. So that's where we wanted to go, was that huge, huge river. There are features on the Greenland ice sheet called, they're melt lakes. So huge, huge lakes that appear. And there are features like this called a moulin. It's the French word for mill, right? And so it is a mill that has been drilled into the ice from this river. And typically you have a huge lake, and as the ice is flowing over the bedrock underneath, as it kind of changes and adapts to the topography of that bedrock, the ice will either open or close or get crushed. So that's how you get some of those crevasses and those very interesting shapes, because the ice is moving like that. And it'll sometimes open up these holes, a moulin, and this water is going from the surface of the Greenland ice sheet through 3,000 feet of ice out to underneath the glacier and out to the ocean. And that is a direct story of sea level rise in action. This is ice that is melting, that is going directly to the global oceans and causing sea level rise. So that's what we wanted to photograph. There are times when those holes will open up and water will be flowing at the rate of Niagara Falls through those features. So I'm going to show a brief little video clip. All the footage, I shot all the footage in this clip, so just kind of keep the perspective of somebody who's having to be there to document James and what he's doing. This will give you a sense of some of the fun adventures we got to go on. Have you ever done something like this before?
No, not at all.
It's all calculated risk. It's not like we're just going out there and playing Russian roulette.
Piece of cake. All right. Look down. Look down. Look down. It's just bottomless. Oh my God. I do not want to go any lower than this. I'm going out here on this broken fin, okay? And I assume it won't collapse. Okay, look, I'm done. Oh, thank you. Testing.
My feet made a cameo in that, which you might have noticed. I've got another, how much time do we have, Connor? Just to,
Okay. 10.
10, great. So there's another video clip I want to show now that's kind of the culmination of the time lapses. So all those cameras that we installed, they were shooting every single hour of daylight. And they've been out there for now 7 years. But when we released the film, we have about 5 years worth of footage from those cameras. They are in Greenland, Iceland, Alaska, Glacier National Park. We've installed some in South America, and we've installed them now in Antarctica and South Georgia Island as well. So the record is continuing to be documented. We're continuing to capture these images. And every half hour of daylight, the camera sensor turns on, checks to see if there's enough light to take a picture. And if there is, it'll go ahead and take one shot and then put the camera back into hibernation mode and wait for another half hour and repeat that cycle. We've also documented things beyond ice because climate change, while we were focusing on an ice story here, the climate change is a much, much broader issue than just ice changing. And those are some of the things that we're continuing to document with time lapses. So we've seen in our backyard, we're based in Boulder, in our backyard, we've seen pine beetles just wipe out these pine trees all across the Rockies. We have some very, very compelling time lapses where you can see those changes happening. We're starting to explore some other areas as well. But let me go ahead and show you this clip. It's just a brief little section from the film that shows the time lapses.
What I'm here to do tonight is bring to you tangible visual evidence of the immediacy of climate change itself. Glaciers matter because they're the canary in the global coal mine. It's the place where you can see climate change happening. Without further ado, let me tell you what we've been seeing out there. This is a glacier called the Solheim Glacier. We're looking down on it. Now we turn on our time lapse. You can see the terminus retreating, you can see this river being formed, you can see it deflating. You go back a couple years in time, that's where it started. That's where it ended a few months ago. Now down onto the side of the glacier, looking across the terminus, this is what we see. Look at this. You'll see deflation happening here as the heat takes away the surface of the glacier and the surface drops. At the same time, a stream is undercutting it from the glacier that's melting faster up valley, washing this thing away. The vast majority of glaciers in the world are retreating. Glacier National Park, Montana will need a new name. We'll be calling it Glacier-less National Park by the middle of the century because all the glaciers will be gone. There's such a strange, bizarre fascination in seeing these things you don't normally get to see come alive.
So that's just a little bit of a taste of what those time lapses look like, and we've seen that at pretty much every single glacier that we've been documenting. Based on where on the planet you look, the numbers are either 97 or 98% of glaciers in those areas that are all retreating, losing mass, and shrinking. So it is this ubiquitous story. There are a couple things that I think we have time for me to talk about. And one of them is this question that we always get in terms of what can I do? And this is something that's really been coming up with us quite regularly because anybody here feel a little bit overwhelmed with the challenge of climate change? Right? It's something where even having spent all the time that we have in this area, we've been trying to figure out how do we use the images that we've created and the footage that we have and the story and the science that we've learned, how do we communicate that and help people do something about this? You know, there are two approaches here. There's the grassroots bottom up and then there's the top down. And we all hear about changing light bulbs and minimizing our own carbon footprint. I think that's incredibly important. We all need to do those things as best as we possibly can. On the Chasing Ice website, we have a long list of things that people can do in their individual lives. I'm personally just kind of tired of telling people to change their light bulbs and use reusable water bottles and things like that. I feel like the people who are interested in those things have been hearing that and doing that for years. And there's this spectrum between people who get it and are already doing stuff and already volunteering and getting involved, and more people that we need to somehow approach and get the information in front of and get the science in front of. And that's been one of the big challenges here. And the other really big challenge, I think many of you would probably agree, is that this is a political issue. This shouldn't be a political issue, but it's been turned into a political issue. There are plenty of things that are very, very much worth having political debates over. The ethics of gun control, the ethics of immigration, the ethics of abortion, those all have these two sides that, you know, rationally you can understand where those perspectives are coming from. But with climate change, this is climate science. This is science. This is not a debate. How many people are debating gravity? Show of hands. How many people debate whether or not the Earth rotates around the sun or vice versa? We have had debates on those issues. We have understood where the scientific consensus is, and we have moved on. And the interesting thing to me is that with climate change as an issue, this is one of the few scientific debates that has massive implications on human civilization. Right? We can debate string theory, we can debate the Big Bang, but that doesn't have any consequence on how we live our lives. This one field of science has huge implications. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about what does that debate look like. Right? We hear about this debate in the press, and every single scientist that I've met and interviewed hundreds of scientists, I've not met a single one that disputes man-made climate change. This is what the debate looks like. This is data that has been published that is based on a survey of over 25,000 peer-reviewed articles where they surveyed, they searched every single one for the phrase global warming or global climate change, and they looked to see of all the abstracts, which ones say that it's not happening, which ones are working off the premise that climate change is false. That slice is less than 0.1% of every article that's been released. Yet that 0.1%, those people are incredibly vocal. They have a lot of money and a lot of influence, and they're very, very vocal. And the reason why I think that this issue has gotten to the point that it has is based on the fact that there's a disproportion to the voices out there. And what we've been trying to do, and what we've been encouraging people to do, is to use their voice. We sometimes get disillusioned by this political system that seems to be operating solely on money. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they are taking that money so that they can buy votes and use it to influence votes. Right? And that is how this system, whether we like it or not, that's oversimplified, but that is how this system works. And my perspective is that we really just need to raise our voices again. So I'm just going to spend a brief minute on this campaign that we are doing, that we've been trying to enact with Chasing Ice to figure out how can we move the needle some more. And it comes down to the fact that it's incredibly hard to move this room and to move that audience. But what if we weren't focusing on the whole room? What if we were focusing on one person? And what if we put all of our efforts into one person, that one red circle there? What would that look like? Instead of trying to shift Congress, let's support one individual politician. And not attack or criticize, but really frame it in terms of support and give them everything that they need to publicly change their stance. And recognize that they're in a really tough position as well. There are congressmen who have changed their stance on climate change who have been outed by opponents that have attacked them because of their stance on climate change. So we've been taking a different approach. We're trying to frame it in terms of support. And we are currently doing a tour in Ohio, in District 12, right outside of Columbus, Ohio, where Congressman Pat Tiberi there has, his last public statement on climate change has been that he doesn't agree that there's a scientific consensus. There is no scientific consensus on man-made climate change, which we know to be false from the scientific data. And so what we're doing is we are making thousands of posters, we're distributing thousands of DVDs. We've already screened for over 4,500 people in his district. We're doing free screenings of the film to any group in the area that is interested in hosting us. We've done screenings at many, many high schools. We did back-to-back screenings for a bunch of the big high schools in his district. And people are writing their message to the congressman and posting it online. This is a farmer, that guy Corey is a farmer who was talking about how it's impacting him directly. Students, parents, we're working with evangelical groups, we're working with Catholics, with interfaith groups, with sportsmen and hunters and fishermen, trying to get somewhat away from the typical environmental lobby or environmental groups that you would expect to be reaching out to the congressman and going to these unexpected messengers. and really trying to get them to support his district, getting the public to support their congressman so that the congressman feels safe to change his stance on the issue. So that's one of the big ideas that we've been trying to leverage and support. If anybody has any connections in the central Ohio area, please let us know. I was meeting with a friend at National Geographic today and telling him about this idea, and literally he was like, oh, I went to college in central Ohio, and we pulled it up, and he went to college exactly in this congressman's district, and he's connecting us to his film professor, and we're going to try and do a screening for their school, and that's just another instance that happened. So anyway, that's what we are doing. If anybody, I was talking with Connor, we can do a screening for Peace Corps volunteers in the area as well, and it's something that Peace Corps volunteers can get very active in our district to get involved. So we have some time for questions, I believe, and then we've got I know there's more on the program, so thank you guys very much.
Gee, that was really good. I mean, if you have not seen the film, it just is such a gripping film. So really try and see it. It's just amazing. Yeah, we're so lucky that you're here. This is terrific that Connor was able to drag you here in spite of all the shenanigans that he obviously did during camp. So Connor just asked me to say a couple words about what Peace Corps is doing in the area of climate change. We have roughly between 1,200 and 1,500 volunteers working in environment and agriculture. And actually, if you think about it, it's pretty hard to think of anything that these volunteers are doing that don't have some bearing on climate change. So, but I just picked a couple of areas where we're working. So the first area, we'll divide these projects into two areas: mitigation, climate change mitigation, and climate change adaptation. In climate change adaptation, the main thing we're doing is climate smart agriculture. And we have about 20 hosts around the world that are doing this. This is actually increasing because of a major initiative that Peace Corps is having now called Feed the Future. And actually the team leader is right here, Mary Louise, so maybe if you have any questions about that, Mary Louise Carlson right there will be able to answer them. In terms of mitigation, we can divide this up into three areas. One would be renewable energy. This is, by the way, for those of you who are not too familiar with Peace Corps works at the village level. We're not out there building fusion reactors or picketing coal-fired power plants. We're working at the village level. And so we work with, one thing we're doing is with renewable energy. So we have volunteers around the world who are working to encourage people to build fuel-efficient cook stoves, in some cases biodigesters. For those of you who don't know what those are, it's basically you take a big pit and you fill it with pig manure, throw in some compost, and you generate methane gas, and you can cook with that. It's kind of fuel intensive. Maybe some of us wouldn't prefer to go that route, but it works in some cases if you have a lot of pigs, for example. We have, or actually there's one going on in Peru that actually operates on guinea pig waste. So I don't want to think of how many guinea pigs they must have to make this thing work. Solar energy. We have a couple of posts that are actually introducing solar photovoltaics in public areas like schools. And we even have a couple of wind turbine projects, especially in Peru. So in particular, I think in the Latin American region, we have a grant from the State Department called ECPA, Energy and Climate Partnership with the Americas. They've given us $1 million for small grants, and this is money very well spent. Our volunteers have built several thousand cook stoves, maybe 100 biodigesters with that money, and it's all, none of it's overhead, it's all rebars and bricks and other materials. So we're really proud of that one. Secondly, I would say we also do environmental education. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the late 70s, early 80s in Paraguay, and we were among the very first environmental education specialists at that time. I think Chile was the first country that had environmental education going on. And now it's actually it's a widespread activity for our volunteers. So those volunteers will work mainly in non-formal situations like camps and clubs, although we do have some who are working with curriculum development, especially in Latin America, Nicaragua, Panama. And so those programs will deal with, some of them educate with climate change, or they get the kids out there planting trees, building permagardens, that type of activity, which leads to the third area where we have an impact on climate change, and that is the area of increasing plant productivity. Because plants are carbon dioxide suction pumps, and so the more plants you're able to get in the ground and survive, and the more plants you can protect from being cut down or burned down, then that helps mitigate to some degree the effects of climate change. You know, the plants will take in the carbon dioxide. That's a temporary, of course, solution, because then when the plant dies, then the carbon goes back in the air, but hopefully some plants will be around still to take the carbon back in. It's around and around. So we have a lot of, we planted a lot of trees last couple of years. That's a good one. We built a lot of permagardens, which increases plant productivity. And we have a few volunteers, maybe not as much as we used to, who are working in protected area management, national parks. Again, particularly in Latin America, I'd say Peru, Mexico, Ethiopia, they've been involved with this, and the Philippines as well. So that's just a quick rundown of what we're doing in the area of climate change. So, woo!
Hi, my name is Connor Sanchez. I work here at Peace Corps headquarters, and first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to Jeff for joining us here today. I think, well, thank you for saving the stories too, if we can, for another time. Just for the record, he was a camp counselor, so he didn't see half of it. And thank you, David, for, I think that was a perfect segue into what we're about to see. We have a couple volunteers here. We have, first off, a married couple in what used to be, in history, considered, or jokingly, posh corps, but they're video conferencing and live, but this is actually, you can't call it that anymore because so many volunteers are able to do this at this time. So this is Emisha and Jameson Jackson.
Hi. It's nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet you.
Yes. And I will let you guys take it away from here. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves to the crowd here and telling us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, my name is Jameson Jackson. This is my wife, Emisha. We're Peace Corps volunteers in Costa Rica, or Posh Corps. We live in a mountain town. It's about 2 hours north of San Jose in Costa Rica. The town that we live in really revolves around agriculture. About 98% of the economy is agriculture-based. So when we first got here, we really saw an opportunity to work with that, because, you know, when you come to Peace Corps, you want to do something that's possible, something that can be implemented, and also something that's sustainable. So we wanted to go with the strongest part of the economy. So we actually, after visiting a couple of farms and getting more familiar, we had the opportunity to visit some of the dairy farms. There's over 1,000 dairy farms in this area. Now, if you know anything about climate change or just agriculture in general, agriculture plays a huge part in climate change. It's about 18% of greenhouse gases are created through agriculture. So we saw a great opportunity of being able to kind of ease that is the damage of agriculture at least in this community, in a grassroots level. With the dairy farms, especially, cows produce, mostly it's methane, which is 20 times more damaging than carbon dioxide. So what we did is we started implementing the idea of biodigesters. Basically, you are taking cow waste, it ferments anaerobically for 25 to 40 days, depending on the temperature, and it produces gas that you can then cook with, and also super high quality fertilizer. So that's really the project. The thing is, when we got in the community, it's all about how do you fund these things? How do you start them? How do you build them with no money? So do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so basically what we did was we utilized the EQA funds through a grant that funded us $3,500 for the project. And since we're up in the mountains, again, we had some climate issues as far as the temperature. So we right now constructed 5 biodigesters with the $3,500, including like high-end plastic that would hopefully last for about 15 years or so, including greenhouse covers and a pump system and everything. And same thing, just working at the grassroots level, and the community, the families, and the participants included farm workers. So it was on a small scale, but it's been really great on our end just to physically see it come together, and that it can be something sustainable, especially from the farmers' end. We were able to raise awareness through their eyes as far as their solid waste disposal and the effects that they're having on the environment, especially with chemical cleaning agents, and effects on emerging water systems downhill from their farms as well. On their end, they're also able to have an immense amount of savings on fertilizer, because the biodigester system not only produces methane gas, which they can use for cooking and for dairy production, it also produces odorless organic fertilizer on the other end. So these farmers, again, are not only learning about the environmental awareness and the effects that they can have, but also they're gaining a lot of savings on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I think that the biggest part about the project too is because the reality is we're not gonna reverse climate change by building biodigesters, but through this process, because there was an incentive for farmers, an economic incentive, they were more open to hearing about the environment, which I think is a huge thing. It's at the grassroots level. That's what I really like about the movie about Chasing Ice, is that it's so clear cut. It's irrefutable. You can't deny it once you see it. Mm-hmm. And at the grassroots level, it's really hard to get people to listen to you without some sort of incentive. And with the biodigesters, there was a reason for families to want to listen to the possibilities and how we can actually affect climate change. So it was a small step, and it rose a lot of awareness in the community, the project overall. So
yes, and one of the other positive effects to using the biodigesters is some of the farmers are a lot more conscious. So we're not able to utilize all of the waste on a daily basis from the cows in the biodigesters. It's only about 6 meters long, but now they're taking different actions to utilize the rest of the waste on a daily basis through a fermentation and compost process. We're talking about covering it and finding different ways to make use with all of their waste, and all of them since the process of stopped using chemical cleaning agents as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you guys so much. And what stage of service are you right now?
We arrived in June 2012, and we finished our service in August of this year. So we're almost at about 2 years in sight.
Okay. And how do you think this experience will shape what you do next? I mean, you have got hands-on experience, work hand in hand with the community. How do you think? What will that impact be, and where will that lead you?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the Peace Corps experience as a whole is incredible experience over 2 years. You can't even put into words how much we were able to take away from this, and how much it kind of changes the way that we think and looking into our future as our purpose. Especially the climate change initiatives and environmental initiatives. That's something that I would definitely like to take with me into my future, while looking for a future job.
I think like in Peace Corps, you really have the opportunity. You have you have 27 months and you really get a chance to work on things that are important to you and things that you're passionate about. It's like the community has certain goals that they want to meet, and you have things that obviously most volunteers come with like ideas of what they would like to do. And you come to a point where you meet in between of something that works, and you really get an idea of what's important to you and what you're passionate about. So I feel like it really opened the doors of what I want to do for when I grow up, you know? So I think that was a big thing I took from Peace Corps for sure.
Awesome, thank you. I want Nati to jump in here. Nati Lake is joining us from Peru, and she is an environmental engineering. She studied environmental engineering at Northwestern University, and now she's in the field. And how you doing? Can you hear me?
Hi, I'm doing well. Can you guys hear me okay?
Good, good. Why don't you
yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Nati, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you're working on in the field.
Okay, so I'm in Peru, and Peru is actually one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change in all of the world. It's considered to be one of the mega biodiverse countries, one of the top 16 mega biodiverse countries, which means that it has like 84 of the 103 recognized ecosystems, and it's really vulnerable to all the effects of climate change. So being an environmental volunteer, it was something that I really wanted to focus a lot of my time on here in Peace Corps. And what's really wonderful about Peru is I've been afforded a bunch of opportunities to work with a variety of different technologies. So within my 17 months, I've had the chance to install 2 biodigesters, a wind turbine, 2 photovoltaic systems. One was for a school without electricity, and the other is actually a really cool project for a reforestation project in a nearby forest up north. On top of that, I also worked a lot with climate change education in the schools. That's one of my primary goals as an environmental volunteer, is to work with environmental education. So we've done a lot focusing on climate change as well as renewable energies. The wind turbine that I installed is actually at the biggest school in my town, and we've got about 560 kids there. So we've been teaching them all about wind energy and renewable energies in general. And as well, we also have been talking about composting a lot, which is very important for reforestation projects, especially in my site, because we have very poor soil quality. For those of you that don't know, the coast of Peru is pure desert. The soil quality is unfortunately very poor, and it's really hard to plant things, even though there's a booming agricultural community. So we do a lot of composting, and one of my other projects is actually making a composting toilet in a nearby park, which again, they're using that soil for a reforestation project, as well as giving some of the soil to my school, where we built a miniature tree nursery, and we're doing reforestation projects with native tree species to try to combat climate change a little bit.
Awesome, thank you so much. Nati, can you describe a little bit about your experience working with your community and working with leaders in your community to work on these projects? Can you describe that experience in detail a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I've worked on these projects with actually a variety of different communities. Some of the projects are within my community, and some are in neighboring communities. For example, the bathroom is in a park that's about 45 minutes outside of my site. But what's been really cool about this is it's really brought out some really wonderful socios, which are community partners. For example, within my municipality, there are these people that are called regidors, and they're basically like the right-hand men of the mayor of the town, and they're really important. And through my work, they've been able to see like what I have skills in, and it's really built me like a lot of confidence with them, and it's really helped me with my other projects. So that has definitely helped me within my community integration. But then the overall impact on my community is I have people coming up and talking to me about these renewable energies. They listen to our radio program and they get really involved and ask questions. A lot of people have actually approached me with project ideas to do renewable energies within our town. Our town actually has electricity, but we do have about once a month we have an electricity shortage. So a lot of people like having kind of some backup energy. And yeah, my community has definitely responded really positively and are definitely interested in it. I have people asking for turbines, solar panels, and biodigesters, usually at least once a month. So it's pretty cool to see how the spread of renewable energies has spread throughout my town. Oh, and then one other thing, I also actually did an ECWA grant similar to you guys in Costa Rica for my wind turbine, and I'm a part of the ECWA committee in charge of the wind resources this year.
Awesome, great. I think, Jeff touched on this a little bit when he was talking. He mentioned that sometimes you can be overwhelmed with the topic of climate change and not really certain what can I do, what am I going to do that's worth my time, that it's going to make an impact. Can you kind of describe your interest in climate change as an undergraduate and thereafter, and what led you to Peace Corps?
Yeah, so I actually got interested in climate change in high school after seeing a documentary. I don't know if you guys have seen Who Killed the Electric Car? That got me really interested in climate change, so I decided that in college I definitely wanted to pursue something that had to do with climate change, and so I studied environmental engineering. And within environmental engineering, I designed a bunch of biodigesters for factory farms. We designed these really cool little turbines that you put on highway barriers so that when cars whiz past them, they power the lights on the highways. And we designed all these really cool technologies, but I didn't get any hands-on experience with any of this. So, after actually my junior year of college, I really started to realize that I wanted, the real-life application experiences with this, and I decided that I really wanted to join Peace Corps. And yeah, Peace Corps afforded me all these opportunities, and it's been so wonderful to do these things that I only really studied in college and to use them in real life.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nati. I want to open up now to the audience just for any questions that they might have for either Nati, Jameson, or Emisha, or for Jeff. That is Patrick Choquette. He's you can ask him questions as well. Patrick is our Director of Innovation, who is responsible for getting this Google Hangout going, so thank you, Patrick.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for taking the time, and for all the people online. This is really great. I've never done this before. So I'm interested in hearing more about, so a lot of what I sort of understood from your presentation is now the stuff that you've made the film, it's really about engaging communities and creating programming that engages people around an issue to take action. I'm wondering also if the volunteers that are currently serving could speak more about how you go about doing that and really gaining community buy-in to impact a larger change through specific tasks and projects.
It's a great question, and it's a really tough question. It's something that we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out. How do you engage with different communities? How do you get them to have ownership over something that is it is a global issue, right? But how do they feel compelled? I'm blown away by some of the stories in terms of what these guys are doing, what those volunteers are doing in terms of actually enacting specific changes and specific solutions. It's overwhelming to hear the number of things that they're doing, in fact. But it's something where what we've done was really trying to share the film and to give the film out to audiences and to let them run with it in terms of here's the visual story. This is what we've figured out how we can use our skill set to go out and do these things. You know, our team, we're not engineers, we're not building turbines or things like that, but this is something where we knew how to take pictures and to capture and tell a story and to share that with the public. So I think one of the trickiest things is figuring out how to tie in with different constituents and different groups and what they're passionate about, what their skill set is, and what they're able to wrap their head around that's going to get them to engage with something that can make a difference. And that's a different story for every audience. You know, we have different messages that we use when we talk with farmers versus when we're talking with high school students versus environmental groups or religious groups. And the reality is that different people are coming at it from very different perspectives, and they kind of need to be helped in terms of seeing what they can do that's going to make an impact. So I wish there was one cookie cutter solution that applied to everybody, but it is, I think it's been a little bit trickier from that perspective. I think what it comes down to really is that everybody has a skill that they can use, that they can leverage to make a difference. And even on the team that contributed to making Chasing Ice, we have editors who have their skill set, and writers with a different skill set, and designers who did the poster artwork, and our web designers, and our lawyers. Everybody is coming at this from a completely different expertise, all wanting to contribute to make a difference to something where our lawyer might not have felt like he could make a difference in climate change, but it actually made a huge difference. It helped this message get out there. So I think that everybody has their own skill set, and sometimes when people ask us, what can I do? I hold up a mirror and I ask, like, what can you do? What are your skill sets? What can you do that's going to make a difference? Can you motivate and kind of bring together a group of people that can take action? Or can you design a turbine or install a solar panel system or do something that's going to make a difference on the ground? So each one of us has something we can do. Off to Costa Rica.
We definitely got that. I would say, you know, a lot like the movie, it was really something that captured the physical change, and it's something different than, you know, throwing figures and numbers and graphs at people to raise awareness on the issue and just kind of have people, you know, think about what things that they can do even on a small scale to make those changes. And a lot like that, and what we do is, similar to Nazi, we work with a lot of surrounding communities on different projects on different levels, between building a recycling center and working on a recycling campaign, or teaching compost courses and whatnot. And it really is a lot about finding the right way to connect with different groups, whether it is high school or we're working with community leaders and municipality, and being able to also empower them to want to make those changes. So it's not always about just, you know, teaching them and, you know, putting something in their faces and have to change it. It's more so kind of empowering those, you know, community members to want to make those changes. And also something that we really had to do as volunteers, we definitely stick out in the community as the North Americans, but what we do on a daily basis, we try to set an example. You know, with anything from little actions of using reusable grocery bags, to helping our neighbor bundle and properly recycle, to planting trees with the community middle school.
No, it just really comes down to like the relationships you build. I think that plays a huge part of it, because as you get to know people in the community over 2 years, you really become a member of the community. And people, you have plenty of times to talk where people actually have an interest in what you're saying, because like, who are you and why are you here? And you have this pedestal almost to talk to them, which I don't think you have very often when you're, you know, in the States and you're not the outsider. You know, when you're not in the fishbowl and everyone's looking at you, you have a much better, you have a platform to speak in and to really get a message out there and to hear the honest opinion of the people that you are living with. So I think that's a huge advantage of Peace Corps also.
Is Nadia still on? Or? All right.
Is Nadia still with us?
I think we lost Nadia.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
I'm right here.
Premature.
Click very farther away.
I'm probably lagging.
Any other questions? All right. Well, if not, I think I just want to say thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the volunteers for joining us via video conference. And thank you all for being here.
We have one more member of the family that needs to make an appearance.
Oh, I think we got one last special guest.
One more special guest.
This is Karma.
The Peace Corps Club.
That is a big pup.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you again for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thank you.